Greetings, everyone. This is Weekly Wanderings for the week of October 29th, 2011. This week's Weekly Wanderings is a little late, should have happened earlier in the week, but I was busy preparing for a adult spiritual retreat, which I just completed a couple of hours ago, and actually want to share a little bit of that experience with you for this week's Weekly Wanderings. So I had the privilege of being a part of a fall adult retreat at our church, and as always, I over-prepared for the retreat, gave lots of things, had lots of ideas for things that we would do, and one of the first things that I wanted us to do was to write a spiritual timeline. And basically what that is like any other timeline that you've maybe had to do in your life, is significant events and moments. But in this case, it's specifically talking about those spiritual moments and spiritual events in your lifetime. So most of us start with our birth and then our baptism perhaps. And then we go on through our lives at the various things that have affected our spiritual journey up until the point where we are today. And then the second session of our retreat last night was supposed to be all of us getting through our spiritual timelines as we shared our spiritual journeys. Well, we started last night at probably about 7:30 with the sharing of those timelines, and we completed those at about 3:30 or 3:15 this afternoon. So obviously, this is another example of how often you and I make our own plans, have our own agenda for things, and then God, through the power of His Holy Spirit, just takes it on and creates something totally unexpected. And that's exactly what happened at the retreat. And it's so funny to me how sharing our spiritual journeys just breaks open relationships into such a powerful thing. And the reason why I want to share this is not so that you'll feel excluded because you weren't at the retreat, but rather what I want to share this week for the Weekly Wanderings is how important it is for us as believers to share our stories, for us to share our spiritual journeys, our walks with Jesus, our journeys with Jesus. Very often, for those of us who grew up in a mainline Protestant denomination or even in the Roman Catholic tradition, sharing our spiritual journeys is not something that we typically do. And oftentimes, it's not even something that we're aware of. But one of the things that I think we can learn from our evangelical brothers and sisters is to tell our story, is the importance of helping people understand the difference that having Jesus and God in our lives has made for our lives. So we who are believers in Jesus obviously are, because we believe He made a difference in our life. And what's important is for us to share that difference and how those connections between my story and your story and ultimately God's story really are interwoven. So that's what I had the experience of witnessing over the last day and a half, and I'm so grateful for that. And what I want to challenge you to do is to write your own spiritual timeline. Start it wherever you think your spiritual journey with Jesus started, and then go to where you are today. And maybe you'll have, like us, an arrow or a ... or to be continued, because of course our spiritual journeys go on until we meet Jesus in heaven, and when He comes back, whichever comes first. And so, but in between that first part of our spiritual journey and when we see Jesus again, there's so much that happens in our life. And I think that when we look at our spiritual timelines, if we really map those out, sometimes we can see God in places now where we couldn't see Him then. And sometimes we can see how God used those times to help us help someone else on their spiritual journeys. So this week's Weekly Wanderings challenge is sort of a fun, easy one, depending on where you're at in your journey. Grab a piece of paper, write a timeline of your spiritual journey. And if you're interested, I would just love for you to share that spiritual journey with me, whether you're part of our church or part of our Weekly Wanderings family, whatever it is. Shoot me an email, or if you're comfortable posting it on Facebook as a note, I would love to read that as well. And I just am so grateful for Jesus and the connection that you and I have together in Him, because I know that somewhere along our spiritual timeline, you and I are connected because of Christ. And for that, I'm eternally grateful tonight. And I wish you God's blessings, and I will talk to you next week. May you have God's peace in your life now and forever.